Hey, Vaquero Nation and the RGV, DJ Kalicha Kid here, ready to share stories and insights from a variety of guests to include researchers, organizational leaders, and community members. You're tuned into the RGV Community Health Hour, where we bridge science and community every Tuesday at 11:30 a.m. Thank you for joining us today during your lunch hour. Sorry we're a bit late. Had some technical difficulties, but today our guest is Marco Arriaga. He is a PhD student in human genetics, and he is also my classmate. And before we introduce to him and start, getting into our conversations, just wanted to play some music for y'all to enjoy. So here we go. All right, and we're back. So thank you for joining us today, Marco. So I'll let you do the honors of introducing yourself to our audience.
Hey, Ricardo. Good morning. Thank you for having me here today, and good morning to all the Vaqueros out there. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. And just as you were mentioning, I'm a PhD student in the Department of Human Genetics. I am originally from Brownsville, Texas. Although I was raised across the bridge in Matamoros because of my roots with my Mexican American roots. My parents are Mexican, and I lived there for most of my childhood and a little bit of my teenage years. Then I came back to the U.S. to continue my education. Funny story, though. The main reason why I came back to the U.S. was because I had a health complication that back at the time, it was just a scare that I had. I had a cyst in my throat, thinking that it was some type of tumor. And at the end of the day, when I came back to the U.S. to get treated and all that, they just told me that it was a cyst, nothing serious. And that gave me the opportunity to decide and concluded I wanted to continue staying in the U.S. and studying in the U.S. And here I am now.
Yeah, so you did your bachelor degree here at UT.
Yeah, well, actually, yeah, I've been here with the university for a long time. Yeah, I did my associates with what back then was known as UTB-TSC. Then I did my bachelor's in biology in UTB, and then I did also my master's in biology with UT-RGV, and now continuing in my PhD. So pretty much my whole academic education has been basically flourish here in the valley, in our community.
Yeah, it's a really awesome experience. I'd say I wouldn't say super unique, because I know that there are a lot of local students that are getting their bachelor's working in labs and maybe have a somewhat similar story as you. But I know also that there's a lot of people out there that don't realize the amazing science that is happening here in Brownsville or even in the valley in general. But talking about that health scare you had in terms of the cyst, I think that'd be a good segue to talk a little bit about what you did last week. So just to kind of segue into it, I just want to say, so my wife, she works for the American Cancer Society's Cancer Action Network, and every year they go to Washington, D.C. to do an event called Lights of Hope, where they put bags out with tea light candle to light it up at night, and the bags are decorated with names of survivors and those who unfortunately lost the battle against cancer. And so Marco was fortunate enough to go and represent the valley and go and talk about the amazing stuff that we're doing down here. So do you want to talk a little bit about whatever you'd like to talk about in terms of the experience from beginning to end, or jump around however you like?
Sure, definitely. Like I was mentioning before, when I was 13 years old, I had a mass growing in my throat area. Initially, we didn't think it was something serious, but when I went to the clinic in Mexico, they told us that there was a chance it could be like a tumor. Well, that kind of turned on the alarms in my family, right? Like obviously when you hear those words, time freezes and a lot of things happening a few seconds after you hear those words. Well, fortunately for me, when I came to Brownsville as an American citizen, had the flexibility to get medical attention over here in Brownsville. they did some tests, and then they found out that it wasn't any type of tumor. It was just simply a cyst, or basically like a fat accumulation growing that they could easily extract from me. And yeah, I went through actually 3 surgeries, two in Mexico and one here in Brownsville. And after my third surgery, well, it seems like the issue was fixed. But what really motivated me in science was that that experience allowed me to see something where I wanted to dedicate my life in the future to something related to medicine and science overall. Initially, the thought was medicine. Like after high school, I graduated from Homer Hanna High School here in Brownsville. And when I started college, I was not too clear what I wanted to do with my career. But what I did wanted to know is that I wanted to do something where I could help people the same way that those doctors helped me deal with the cyst that I had, which was kind of like a turning point in my life. Um, it may not sound like a big deal for most people, and now as an adult, I look back and I was like, oh, it's actually not that of a big deal. But back then, I mean, things that you don't know, I was ignorant, and I mean, my family were scared, so that made me even more scared. But now, as a older adult, I was like, okay, I wanna dedicate my life to see how I can do medicine to help. So my initial plan was to do nursing. Uh, Unfortunately, that didn't work out for me. Back then, the nursing program in UTBTSC got basically canceled for a whole year when those two universities separated. So when UTB was independent, then I decided to switch majors to a biology major. And the reason for that was because of my interest in science. I wanted to understand how these things happen. Um, and so before that, I had like several like full-time and part-time jobs outside of the university. But when I made that change in my degree and then also in my career, an opportunity to work in the university as a lab coordinator assistant arose. And I wasn't too sure what a lab coordinator assistant was, but when I did an interview, most of the things that we talked about in the interview were like, "Oh, you're gonna help us like make solutions, move boxes, accommodate things for classes in this biomedical sciences program that back in the day was fairly new." And I was like, "Yeah, cool." So honestly, it was at that point where I met the field of biomedical research. Like before that, I had no idea that out in our community we had laboratories that would do science and research to try to come up with alternative treatments or some type of like methods to ease disease or even try to cure disease, different types of diseases, right? So for me, kind of like I started putting those things together. I remember about my experience, and then I found out that through research, like one breakthrough that, or if you collaborate through a breakthrough, you can help thousands, even millions of people, not only in your community, but around the world. So that's what basically allowed me to focus in this career. And then things started to come to me. Like I had an opportunity to work in a lab. For several years, since 2014, I worked with Dr. Suan Chu in the Department of Health and Biomedical Sciences. This is a bioengineering lab, but they also focus on using biomaterials for cancer treatment and also tissue engineering. So I learned a lot of stuff in that lab, and all the stuff that I learned in my classes were actually being applied in the lab. So that helped me solidify all that information that I was absorbing from my classes. After that, I did my master's in biology, also in the same lab. And then I took like almost a 3-year break from doing research because I dedicated my career to be a science teacher. However, like every summer, I would be like back in the lab when I had the time to continue moving on to the different type of projects, including my thesis project back then for my master's. And when I finished my master's, I was rehired by the university as a research associate and also in the biomedical department. At the same time, as you might already know, like the human genetics program, the PhD in human genetics program started back in fall 2022. And as same thing like you, I applied and got accepted. And again, the same type of motivation. Like cancer is one of the things that a lot of people suffer from, especially in Hispanics. It's like the number one cause of death in the Hispanic population in the U.S. And so all of this is linked to what I did last week, which was the whole point of talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
So last week, with the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network,
Mm-hmm.
I went to Washington, D.C., and we did what is known as a leadership summit and a lobby day. So I serve as a volunteer in that organization, and I did it because I wanted to take a different perspective on how the community deals with cancer. Like here from the lab, you're basically really focused on trying to develop therapies to help understand cancer, and by doing that, try to see we can find different methods to either treat the disease or even cure it, right? But then there's other more humane scopes, if you want to put it that way, and that's what I experienced when I went for that lobby day. I met a lot of people that are cancer survivors, family members from people that, like you said, unfortunately lost the battle against cancer. But it was a life-changing event because you learn on how these laws are being applied and how the laws or how the government is helping the community that is affected by this disease. And not just like cancer does affect everyone, but it affects different people in different ways. Obviously, the patient is the one suffering the most, but then there's also their families, right, and their friends. And it's important to advocate for these type of diseases that are very devastating and really hard to deal with, especially with we do have like a few cancers where the mortality rate has decreased when it comes to cancer, but it's still high, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why it's decreased is because of all the type of research that we do, not only here in academic institutions, but also like in industry to develop different type of like early detection tests or treatments, right? To be able to be cancer free.
Yeah. And so, that's a great, thing that you went to go do. And especially bringing that perspective from you experiencing, your health scare and living down here your whole life and knowing what the community deals with and what burdens them. And I think the hard part is part of that cancer burden is, the things we study and the things we research for good reason are the I guess the more common, I guess you could say, like diabetes, the fatty liver, and obviously they're studied more in depth, and because they affect a larger population or community, as opposed to like the rare cancers that might affect 100 people in a year versus other cancers where there'll be 90,000+, 100,000+ diagnoses in a year. And I think I just watched a thing on Parkinson's disease, and I think I was talking with you a little bit about this the other day. Maybe not, though. It's pretty recent. So they do surveys of disease across the country, and then they see the pockets of concentrations. And one of the pockets that they showed, it was an ABC News report. I think it was ABC News. And they're mostly focused on like the Pittsburgh area, and they talk about the industrial, how it was a big industry, with the Industrial Revolution and all kinds of factories pumping out all kinds of stuff into the environment, and now people are getting sick from it. And then they show a map of the whole U.S., even though it's focused on Pittsburgh, the story, but then they circle the RGV as one of the main like regions of Parkinson's. And it's kind of blows me away, because I had never even, before moving down here, I would have never have guessed that it was such a prevalent disease down here, and
yes, look, now, and as you might already know as well, as part of the Department of Human Genetics, we've been learning a lot of things that are very significant in the field for research. Like, for example, we're focusing a lot of our work on a lot of our research on different ethnicities, so specifically Hispanics or Mexican Americans, which is an understudied population across all the research that is published out there, right? So as you already know, like most of the research done is usually on whites, which is definitely something good, right? Because we can have some type of therapy, but there are certain diseases, there are certain exposures in the environment that affect different populations more aggressively. So for us here in the Valley, in a community that is mainly predominated by Mexican Americans or Hispanics, we have high prevalence in diseases such as diabetes, right? Fatty liver disease, as you were mentioning. Even there's also a high prevalence in like Alzheimer, for example. So all of these diseases are actually somehow interconnected. Like scientifically, we still trying to understand how they're interconnected. But what we can see, also cardiovascular disease, by the way, what we can see is that there is some trend that these diseases develop each other at some point, especially affecting those that are older. And then here we have other disparities, like, for example, insurance. A lot of people here are uninsured, so they probably don't go to the doctor to do like yearly checkups, so they have no idea. And by the time that they go to the doctor, it could be too late. They either have developed some type of like chronic disease like diabetes or fatty liver disease, or I mean, unfortunately, some cases suffering from cancers or other type of diseases that are even harder to work with, right? So I think in the one of the goals of the human genetics department is obviously looking at the genetics on this understudied populations and see what are the different genetic components that we can use to try to develop drugs or try to understand why this population is more sensitive to this type of diseases compared to other populations, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I want to ask you some more about your DC trip, but before we do that, we're going to take a quick break and play some music. So thank you all, everyone. All right, and now back to questioning Marco about his dealings last week in Washington, D.C. So I saw a really cool picture of you and Ted Cruz together. How did that come about? And, you know, is there anything that special y'all had to do, wait around for him a little bit, or was he pretty quick about getting with y'all?
I mean, you can just see how busy he is, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, like I think now that we're running closer to like elections and that type of stuff, everybody's trying to like do their work, and you know, I mean, all the time, obviously. But no, it was actually a really nice event where we had the opportunity. So I was one of the volunteers with the ASC CAN, but obviously we were like a total of like about 700 volunteers that went to Washington, D.C. last week to advocate for cancer and cancer research. One of the events that we had from Texas, I think we were a group of like 30, although, as you mentioned earlier, I was the only one from the Valley that attended this event, right? But we were about 30, and we had the opportunity to basically talk about our different asks that we had for the senator and for the legislators and representatives over there in DC. And besides them, we actually also talked to like the rest of the staff for the Senator Cruz team. So we talked to other assistants and even interns that basically students, right, that are trying to build their way into that field, right? Yeah. It was really, really important because some of these, especially talking about the interns, some of the interns, like they had no idea on how the community is down here. I mean, when they were talking to me, obviously, but overall, like they were also understanding why, like advocating for cancer was important for us, and we talk about the different asks, including increasing the funding for NIH. Increasing the funding for specifically the National Cancer Institute in the NIH. We also requested an extension or the permanent pass of the MSET bill. The MSET bill is basically it's a test that can detect multi-cancer detection at early stages. Wow. This type of like tests are actually still not FDA approved. But what we were pushing for is that or by the way, FDA, right, the Food and Drug Administration. What we're pushing for is for them to help us push this and make it a law, right? So by the time that the FDA approve a few of these tests, people have the opportunity to use them. Because if we wait until these tests are approved by the FDA and then we push to get it passed through Congress, then we are going to miss a lot of people that might have this chance that can be that could be an opportunity for them to save their lives. Early detection is one of the strongest, in a way, therapies that we have, and it just allows doctors to be able to help cure cancer, or at least treat it in a way that eventually, with time and following the instructions from the doctors, people can actually survive it for many years, right? Or maybe even be cancer free.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, early detection is definitely important. And that's why the annual health, your annual checkups with your doctor are important, because, it's just kind of almost like an individual, tracking of your health over time, right? Like a longitudinal study of yourself, and it's just seeing, and for me, like right now, I'll be 39 in December, and I feel healthier and stronger than I did 10 years ago, because I'm eating different. I'm,
nice.
and so yeah, tracking your health over the long term based on your lifestyle, your diet changes, adding kids to the mix, and the way your diet changes with having kids, and
yeah. And, and in a way, I agree with what you're saying, but what we have to understand as a community is that we are in a good position. A lot of people in the community don't have the time to fix their diet, or sometimes the will to fix their diet, to exercise, to look for their health. Some of these people in our community don't prefer not to go to the doctor because they'll be losing hours at their jobs. So
yeah, exactly.
And me as a Hispanic, and I consider myself a Mexican American, I know how stubborn we can be about going to the doctor. I include myself in that, although I know the importance of it. So I can imagine those are not very close to the field as I am, right? Like that they might not fully understand how important it is. So that actually comes with our last asks that we went to talk about in Washington. Something else that is going to be finishing in the fiscal year 2025 is the CARE Act. I'm so sorry. Which is basically a program that allows people with low resources to get help from the government to get insurance, right? So just in Texas, about 5 million people were able to get insurance. An increment of 5 million people got insurance through this plan last year. So this bill is going to be expiring in 2025. So we were also pushing for this to be extended or to be permanent. So that way a lot of people don't stay without this type of protection, especially those that really need it, right? Like individuals that might not have the resources to be able to pay for their health plan on their own, So it's important for us to advocate for that as well. And all of those were the three main topics that we were to talk in Washington. And we got a very positive response from Senator Cruz, and as well as other representatives from Texas, including Monica de la Cruz, which is for this here for basically Cameron, which is District 32, and other representatives that we went to visit in Washington.
Mm-hmm. So, did you get to sit in on any sessions? I think Cassandra had mentioned that y'all got to.
Yes, like I'm saying, like all these.
Those are all sessions.
All these representatives that we went to visit.
Oh, those
were the sessions.
Oh, okay.
So,
well, when I hear session, I think of like passing laws. Obviously, you're talking about what you would like, but I mean like a pound a gavel, very like, you know what I'm saying, like very
well,
official.
Look, I am not very experienced in that field. It was my first time experiencing something like this, but this lobby day, it was basically a day reserved for our organization, SES Can, to go in there and talk to this each senator and representative, in this case, representatives of Texas, obviously. They had their own office in Washington, and we go to their offices and then we express the reasons of why we think our asks are important. And obviously, we share a little bit about our backgrounds and our personal stories for them to understand why these laws needs to be pushed, and they need to be at some point passed so the people can take this type of advantage, because at the end of the day, that is what the government should be for, right? For the people. So we need to put our voice up there in Washington so they can understand what type of problems we have down here, or just in the whole state in general and in the nation. And so that way they can see how important of a topic it is, and hopefully in a way, like I said, we got a lot of good responses. So it seems like we caught their eye in the petitions that we were asking for. And I mean, several of them basically told us, like, yes, this is something that we're interested on. The type of asks that you're requesting from us are similar things that we want to push for. So we're kind of like in the same mentality, right? They also see that those are things that need to be like being paying attention here in the Valley and in Texas as well.
Yeah, I think, there are a few things that are bipartisan these days where it's support from both Republicans and Democrats. And I feel like this, I don't follow politics too much, but I feel like this is probably one of those things where everybody can agree, like, cancer's bad, regardless of who you vote for or whatever. Like,
Correct.
It's just like, this is just basic human,
Yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised. A lot of these representatives that we talked to, one of the reasons why they were so understanding is because they themselves went through cancer, or their close family members went through cancer. So, like, I was reading some statistics the other day. Like, I was seeing that 1 of every 3 adults in Texas is going to hear those words at some point in their lifetime.
Wow.
You have cancer. So that's a big, big, big thing.
Yeah.
So
that's kind of
scary. It's scary. Yeah,
and
of course it is. But, this is why, for me, it's important to be in this field of, like, research. And now that we're part of this genetics program, like, not necessarily only for cancer, but for all the other different types of what we call complex diseases, like diabetes, fatty liver disease, Alzheimer's. We want to understand how the genetics play a role, right? And something that, as you might also know, we are focusing a lot on what we call the exposome, right? Or we're looking at all these exposures. So going back to what you were talking about the exposures in Pittsburgh, over here in the Valley, we have a lot of things going on, and a lot of things that we don't realize are hurting us. So we need to first understand what those things are, and then we can be able to try to see we can develop therapies for the different types of diseases. I mean, for a recent diabetes, I mean, yes, the genetics can play a role, but including the environmental effects into our genetics, then we can see a better, more clear picture of what is affecting our physiology or genetics, and what is inducing the development of these type of diseases that are highly prevalent in highly prevalent in our community, but still highly prevalent compared to the rest of the nation, like diabetes and fatty liver disease, for example.
Yeah, and an example that I always gave before joining this program and really learning about it is because I've always been fascinated with gene-environment interaction, or how the environment affects our genes and our DNA. And so when I interviewed for the program, I just kind of explained, like, hey, I'm interested in learning about, like, how the environment makes us sick. Like, obviously Chernobyl and Fukushima and these sites where nuclear reactors melted down and released radiation. Well, obviously you don't want to be there, right? Because you're going to be sick. And so the environment will make you sick. And now I know that's literally everything from the air we breathe, the water we drink, the foods we eat, like our environment, whether it's internal or external, right? Our own personal stresses, like how much do you stress about your job or your finances or things like that. But for me, the way I was just thinking was, like, maybe, because there's a lot of climate change and global warming deniers in terms of, like, let industry do what they want. I almost feel like if, if you don't think that these factories pumping a bunch of stuff into the air isn't making the earth warmer, you should at least know without a doubt that it's making your community sick. Like whether you think it's heating up the world is a different story, but I promise
or
you,
themselves,
it's,
right?
yeah. So it's like just these things that we learn, and that's why I love school. That's why I'm in this PhD program, because I just love to learn these things. And for me, being an engineering undergrad, chemical engineering, I learned about heat transfer, mass transfer, fluid transfer. And it's just like really cool to learn like fundamental laws of how things work in the universe. So that's why I'm,
Yes.
and now I've never had the background of biology like you do, but man, just to learn about how all these cells and pathways and all these things work, and the depths of understanding it in terms of what we know about disease and biology, it's like remarkable stuff.
Yeah, I think, our program is obviously focused in genetics, but as you're mentioning, we still need to be very interdisciplinary, we still need to know chemistry, biochemistry, biology, we still need to have some knowledge of all those fields, because that's going to help us better understand the genetics. And, what I also wanted to mention is that now in our department, we have access to instruments that are really, really highly sensitive, and they're like, in a way, top technologies. I don't know if you talk about a little bit on your show before, but we have like basically some of the things that we can talk about is obviously, for example, the Mexican American. We have cohorts of Mexican Americans those are basically the samples that we use to investigate all these different diseases, and the huge pedigree tree that we have of those Mexican American family samples, which allows us to increase the significance in our results and fully understand genetic variants that are being affected to a specific exposure. In addition to that, we had something more like where I'm focusing on, which is the different type of omics technologies, whether it's proteomics, metabolomics, right, phosphoproteomics, which are basically more like a global identification of these type of molecules that can give us insights on how the pathways that you were talking about earlier are affected, again, when exposed to environmental toxins, or just chemicals that are hanging out in your backyard, basically.
Yeah.
Right. Then we also have like animal studies as well, with a model that we're proposing as well. Most of the work being done in usually mouse and rats. We also have the Monodelphis domestica, or the laboratory opossum, that give us flexibility on different types of investigations to look at different perspectives on research compared to what the mice and the rat can give us. And we also have the iPSC technology, right? So from those individuals that we have in our cohorts, we can actually extract this specific type of white blood cell on the blood that can be reprogrammed to be a stem cell, and then differentiated into a disease phenotype, or a cell that is part of a disease, and we can better understand the genetics by removing the whole environment, and then we can see like what are the effects of the different types of exposure to these environmental free cell, right? And like all these different types of technologies that we had, all the different types of clinical work that we have, I think is making the program stronger. And in a way, it's also an invitation for those students that are barely building their careers. If they want to do something like this, they need to know and understand that this PhD program can offer you that, and probably more, right? You and me are both part of the first cohort, and we have seen a lot of growth in a couple years. So I don't doubt that in a couple years more, when we're about to finish, there's going to be many more things for the students from our community, and even students from all the parts of the world to come and help contribute in the research that we do at the end of the day, to help our community and help basically the world, right? That's the whole point of it.
Yeah, and that's, I mentioned it before, in terms of like, hey, come to our journal club, come to the clinic on Fridays, just come by the building if if you're interested in this kind of stuff, and just say like, hey, I heard, about this place on the radio, or I walked by it, because there's so many students that walk by that brand new building, and I'm sure they're intrigued about seeing us go in and out, what's going on in there. So, but a lot of our volunteers that we have in the lab now came through the grad fair that we did both in Edinburgh and in McAllen. I'm sorry, Edinburgh and here in Brownsville. And so I, stop by those grad fairs and talk to us and talk to whatever departments you're interested in. And like I've mentioned before, don't be afraid to ask to volunteer, because me personally, I thought those opportunities had to be presented to yourself as opposed to like going in and just being like, hey, I got free time. Do y'all need help? And of course, especially in our department, we can never have enough hands because there's so many different projects and so many different things going on.
Yeah, definitely. And also I take this opportunity to invite students to our fairly new organization, the Genetic Research Association of Scientific Scholars, or the GRASS organization. And we are barely, we're still in the process of finalizing the completion of this organization, but we'll be distributing flyers and inviting people that might be interested of learning more about what we do in the program, and advancing their opportunities, increasing their opportunities to do this type of work. And at some point we'll be sending emails and putting flyers around campus for those that might be interested of joining us.
Yeah, so keep an eye out for those. And with that, we are going to take a quick break. Thank you. Man, I love Alicia Keys. She knows how to just, what an amazing musician. So anyway, Marco, getting back to our talk. So now that we're coming up on the end of the show, I just thought it'd be good to spend a few minutes just at, whatever advice you have for students, because we know each other's story pretty well. We both had our struggles as students starting out, like every student, right? You get out of grade school and then get thrown into community college or straight to university. And it's a whole different ball game in terms of the expectations, right? So, for me, when I was in grade school, I could just pay attention in class and pass tests and quizzes and whatever I needed. And then it's not like that in college. You actually have to go out and study. And, there's not enough time in class to focus and learn. They're expecting you to learn on your own. So just, whatever advice you have and anything you'd like to say to our listeners and, help them reach their aspirations and their goals the way you're reaching yours.
Yeah, actually, thank you for that question, because I wish I could be hearing this when I was 10, 15 years younger. So some advice that I would give to those students that are going through this academic process right now is read, and read a lot. I think that's one of the most powerful tools that you can have as an undergrad, because it's gonna help you build, not only enhance your reading skills, but it's gonna help you gain more knowledge, and it's gonna help you even with your writing skills. I think those two things are very undervalued in our community, reading and writing. I had to admit, maybe it's the people that I now closer to, but now I can see it more that younger students do things like that. But when I was at that age, I could tell you that I had a different life. Maybe had to do, and this could actually relate to many other students now, I had to prioritize having a job outside of school rather than my own school. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I had a full-time job and another part-time job. So studying, there was no time to study. So whatever I could learn in class, that was everything I could do, right? So I never considered myself a top student. I had comments from people, from professors, that they told me that they see the potential that I have, but reality is that things could have been better if when I was younger I would have focused a little bit more of my time on reading and writing. And my grandma used to tell me all the time when I was a child, ask questions. Don't be afraid. Ask questions, whether it's something very simple. Remember, there's no dumb questions. The real dumb thing to do is not to know, not to ask,
right?
Not
to say anything. Yeah, exactly.
So don't be afraid of asking questions. Read, write a lot, and find something. And this is the hardest part. Find something that motivates you every day. And you have to understand the difference between finding something that motivates you and finding something that you like. Because something that you like, I'm going to tell you right now, the liking part is not going to happen every day. There's
Mm-hmm.
going to be things. Every job has their pros and cons. Everything that you decide to do in your life has their pros and cons. Maybe for some people more pros than cons, but
Mm-hmm.
there's always something that you're not 100% with it, and that's okay. Like it's all right. Just but if you find something that motivates you, then when you have cons in the front of you, then you can overpass those obstacles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you have a goal, you have like something that you feel might be bigger than yourself, something that you want to get to. And yeah, for me, research is that, something that I just, like they say, put in my little grain of sand is my goal in life, and to build that, that build some type of like breakthrough or a treatment that is going to help
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people. That's kind of like my goal in life. So that's my motivation for every day and the stuff
Mm-hmm.
that I do. And believe me, just with a family, like as you might know, like I have a almost 9-month old, so things get harder. So as you grow older, things will get harder and harder and harder. But if you have the motivation and the support from your family and your peers, there's nothing that you cannot achieve.
Yeah, and I'd say that it's important that because obviously we're almost like a month into the semester now, more or less.
Mhm.
And at the beginning of the semester, it was hard to find a parking spot, and now it's a little bit easier. And so I just say that because I don't, we all have our hardships and things happen, and just you should, even if you had to drop your classes for whatever reason, you shouldn't feel like a dropout, right? You shouldn't feel like a loser. You should never think that way, because everybody takes their own path on this journey. For me, I had to join the military first in order to get my school paid for to do these types of things, and I'm very lucky to have ended up here. But I just say that because we all have a different path, and I met a person yesterday who is a year younger than me, wants to go back to school. And the woman who saved my life in the military, she called herself a Depression era baby. She grew up in the early 1900s, and she didn't get her bachelor's degree till she was 50 because she wasn't allowed to go to school for a lot of her life. And so she didn't get her bachelor's degree till 50, and she worked till she was 75, and she retired. And I basically met her like right as she was retiring, and she saved my life when I was in the military, because without her, I would have actually, maybe ended up in military prison or done something crazy. So, but other than that, is there any final words? Because we're coming up here on the end of the show.
Yes, no, basically, I already talked a lot and said all the things that I wanted to say, but I take this opportunity once again to thank you for inviting me, and that I hope that students take all of our conversation in the most optimistic, and we're doing this in a way also out of our hearts as well. So it's just to help those students that might need to be listening to this type of stories, and to know that the science is out there, and that our community can be exposed to it in different ways. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thanks for doing the show, and thank you all for tuning in. Like always, I say, stay safe, stay curious, stay healthy, and let's try to thrive together. RGV. And with some more rain in the forecast, make sure your lights are on, you're driving safe. And until next week, everyone, thank you.